The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the familiar sounds of 1,000 different species communicating. Translator devices hummed softly as they converted clicks, whistles, and electromagnetic pulses into understandable speech. Ambassador Zexthai of the Elongari delegation adjusted her crystalline breathing apparatus and reviewed the data tablet before her with obvious disgust. 70 to 80 solar cycles, she announced to her fellow council members, her voice dripping with disdain. That is the pathetic lifespan of these so-called humans who dare to request membership in our esteemed Galactic Council. A chorus of amused chittering erupted from the insectoid Crixnal representatives. Their compound eyes gleamed with what could only be described as mockery. Barely a sneeze in cosmic terms, clicked Prime Crixnal Vorth through his translator. We live for 3,000 of their years. What could beings with such fleeting existence possibly contribute to galactic civilization? The hulking Borvani delegate, General Craxus, slammed one of his 4 massive fists on the council table, causing several smaller species to jump in their seats. Ridiculous! My people have individual warriors who have fought in battles longer than these humans have existed as a spacefaring species. They are insects, mayflies, not worthy of our time. Ambassador Lyrian of the Ascended Collective, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form millennia ago, projected her thoughts directly into the minds of all present. We have observed galaxies birth and die. These humans, they are but a flicker. A brief spark that will extinguish before they can achieve anything meaningful. The holographic display at the center of the chamber showed detailed files on humanity. Population, 8.2 billion across their home system. Average lifespan, 78.6 Earth years. Technological level, basic space travel, primitive AI, nuclear capability. The data seemed to confirm every prejudice the council members held. Look at this, Zexthai continued, manipulating the hologram to show Earth's timeline. Their entire recorded history spans only about 12,000 of their years. My grandmother has lunch appointments older than their civilization. They've had writing for what? 6,000 years? We were building interdimensional gateways when their ancestors were still trying to master fire. The aquatic depth dweller representative, speaking through a specialized water tank, added his own commentary. Their neural patterns show they spend approximately 1/3 of their already brief existence in unconsciousness. They call it sleep. What kind of evolved species requires such inefficiency? We depth dwellers are conscious for our entire 4,000-year lifespans. And their reproduction cycles, scoffed another delegate from the silicon-based Crystalline Confederacy. They require nearly 2 decades of development before reaching maturity. By that time, they've already consumed a significant portion of their total lifespan. We reach full intellectual and physical capacity within solar cycles of our formation. The debate continued for hours, with each species taking turns to mock and dismiss humanity's application for council membership. The temporal weavers, who experienced time non-linearly, were particularly condescending. We perceive their entire species' past and probable future simultaneously. They rise, they fall, they are forgotten, all in what we consider a moment's distraction. Admiral Kelthera of the Void Runners, a species known for their aggressive expansion across star systems, leaned back in her chair with amusement. My fleet has siege campaigns that last longer than human lifespans. How can we take seriously a species that cannot even witness the results of their own long-term planning? As the ridicule continued, a small notification appeared on the Council's central computer system. An aide approached Zexthai and whispered something in her auditory receptors. Her crystalline features shifted, showing mild surprise. It appears, she announced to the chamber, that these humans have submitted additional documentation. They claim to have cultural and scientific achievements that somehow compensate for their brevity. She paused for effect. They have specifically requested that we examine their historical records, their literature, their scientific discoveries, and something they call human legacy. The chamber erupted in laughter. Species that had witnessed the rise and fall of entire star civilizations found the notion that 70-year lifespans could produce anything of lasting value absolutely hilarious. "Very well," Zexathai declared, wiping moisture from her optical organs after her fit of laughter subsided. "Let us examine these human achievements for our amusement. I'm sure we could all use some entertainment before we formally reject their application." The first human transmission began playing on the chamber's central display. It showed an elderly human male with white hair and kind eyes, standing in what appeared to be a simple recording studio. "Greetings, members of the Galactic Council," the human began. "My name is Professor James Chen, and I represent humanity's application for council membership. We understand that our lifespans may seem brief compared to your species. We do not dispute this biological reality. However, we believe that the length of existence is not the sole measure of a species' worth or potential contribution to galactic civilization." Several delegates exchanged amused glances. General Craxus muttered something about the audacity of such short-lived creatures presuming to lecture the council. Professor Chen continued, seemingly unaware of the mockery he was facing. "We would like to present 3 categories of human achievement for your consideration. First, our scientific and technological progress relative to our time span. Second, our cultural and artistic contributions. And third, what we call the acceleration principle, our species' unique ability to accomplish exponential growth and innovation within compressed time frames." The display shifted to show a timeline of human scientific achievement. In the span of just 400 Earth years, we progressed from believing the Earth was the center of the universe to landing on our moon. In the last century alone, we have developed quantum computing, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and fusion power. We have gone from inventing powered flight to exploring our outer solar system in the span of a single human lifetime. A few council members stopped their conversations to pay attention to the display, though most continued their dismissive chatter. "To put this in perspective," Professor Chen explained, "our technological advancement in the past 500 years exceeds what most species achieve in 5,000. We believe this represents a form of temporal efficiency that could benefit the Council's long-term projects." The Elongari delegate snorted with derision. "Temporal efficiency? They're simply catching up to what we achieved eons ago. Nothing impressive about reinventing the wheel, regardless of how quickly you do it." The transmission continued to show human achievements, the development of medicine that had doubled their lifespan in just 2 centuries, their artistic works that captured complex emotions and experiences, their literature that explored the depths of consciousness and morality. "Furthermore," Professor Chen said, "we have developed what we call institutional memory. While individual humans may live briefly, our societies, universities, and governments preserve and build upon knowledge across generations. A human scientist today builds upon the work of scientists from centuries past. Our corporations and governments maintain continuity of purpose across multiple human generations." "How quaint," commented the Temporal Weaver representative. "They've discovered the concept of record-keeping and pretend it makes them equivalent to species with natural longevity." As the first transmission ended, the council chamber buzzed with renewed mockery. The consensus was clear. Humanity's brief lifespan made them unsuitable for membership in a galactic community where the shortest-lived species existed for at least 500 human years. However, Zexathai noticed something peculiar in the supplementary data that had arrived with the human transmission. Hidden within the cultural files were detailed psychological and sociological profiles of humanity. These weren't just academic papers. They were comprehensive analyses of how humans coped with their mortality, how they structured their societies, and how they motivated themselves despite knowing their time was limited. Curious, she muttered to herself, though she didn't share this observation with the council. The data suggested something she hadn't expected. Humans weren't paralyzed by their short lifespans. Instead, they seemed to be driven by them. The council voted to review the second human transmission, though it was clear they intended this as a formality before rejection. The unanimous expectation was that humanity would provide more desperate pleading and attempts to rationalize their obvious biological inferiority. What they were about to discover would challenge every assumption they had made about the relationship between lifespan and achievement, between quantity of time and quality of contribution. The humans had prepared something that would force the Galactic Council to reconsider not just their application, but their fundamental understanding of what made a species valuable to galactic civilization. As the chamber prepared for the second transmission, none of the council members could have predicted that they were about to encounter concepts that would shake their understanding of existence itself. The humans were about to demonstrate that in the cosmic scale of things, sometimes it's not how long you live that matters. It's what you do with the time you have. The seeds of doubt, though barely perceptible, had been planted. The next transmission would water them in ways the council could never have anticipated. The second human transmission began with a different human speaker. This one was younger, perhaps middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair and intense eyes that seemed to look directly at each council member despite the vast distances of space between them. "I am Dr. Sarah Martinez," she began, "and I serve as Humanities Director of Temporal Psychology. I understand that our previous transmission may have seemed like standard diplomatic positioning. What I'm about to share with you is something entirely different. We're going to discuss the psychological and sociological implications of mortality and why short lifespans might actually be an evolutionary advantage rather than a weakness." Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The Crixnall delegation stopped their chittering. Something in the human's tone suggested this wasn't going to be another plea for acceptance. "Let me begin with a question that our philosophers have debated for millennia," Dr. Martinez continued. "What drives innovation? What pushes a species to achieve greatness? We've studied your species extensively through our long-range observations, and we've noticed some interesting patterns." The display behind her shifted to show comparative data from various galactic civilizations. Timeline graphs, technological development curves, and sociological analyses filled the screen. "The Elongari," she said, nodding toward Zexthai's delegation, "achieved interstellar travel approximately 40,000 years ago. Your species has since improved their technology by roughly 12%. The Crystalline Confederacy mastered energy manipulation 25,000 years ago and has advanced their capabilities by approximately 8% since then." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the chamber. These weren't insults. They were observations backed by data that the humans somehow had access to. "The pattern is consistent across nearly every long-lived species in the galaxy," Dr. Martinez explained. "Initial rapid development followed by thousands of years of gradual incremental improvement, what we call the immortality plateau." General Craxus growled his displeasure. "You dare to analyze us? Your species that has barely mastered basic space travel?" Dr. Martinez smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both humble and confident. "General, your people are remarkable warriors. Your military technology is sophisticated beyond anything we could hope to achieve in our current state. But our records show that your weapon systems are essentially identical to those used in conflicts 8,000 years ago. Incrementally improved, yes, but fundamentally unchanged." The Borvani general's forearms tensed, but he said nothing. The human was correct, though he would never admit it publicly. "Now, let's examine the human timeline," Dr. Martinez continued. 400 years ago, our fastest mode of transportation was a horse. Today, we can travel between planets. 300 years ago, we communicated by handwritten letters. Today, we can transmit information instantaneously across solar systems. 100 years ago, we thought the atom was indivisible. Today, we manipulate matter at the quantum level. The display showed an exponential curve that was almost vertical compared to the gentle slopes representing other species' development. The reason for this acceleration isn't superior intelligence or resources, she explained. It's urgency. Every human researcher knows they have perhaps 30 to 40 productive years in their career. Every human leader knows they have a limited time to make their mark. Every human parent knows they must prepare their children for a world they themselves will not live to see. Ambassador Lyrian of the Ascended Collective projected her thoughts into the chamber. You're suggesting that your weakness is actually a strength? That mortality drives progress? Not just progress, Dr. Martinez replied. Innovation, risk-taking, and rapid adaptation. When you have forever, there's always tomorrow to solve problems. When you have 70 years, you solve them today. She gestured to the display, which now showed detailed psychological profiles. We've identified something we call mortality pressure. It manifests in several ways. First, compressed learning periods. Human children absorb information at rates that would be impossible if they had millennia to learn. They must master language, social interaction, and basic skills within the first 2 decades of life. The aquatic depth dweller representative stirred in his tank. This sounds like desperation, not efficiency. Perhaps, Dr. Martinez acknowledged, but desperation breeds innovation. Let me give you an example. 60 years ago, one of our researchers was diagnosed with a terminal illness. She had perhaps 5 years to live. Instead of accepting her fate, she revolutionized our understanding of genetics and developed the foundation for what became our gene therapy technology. She died, yes, but her work has saved millions of lives since. She paused, letting that sink in. How many of your species' greatest discoveries were motivated by the absolute knowledge that the discoverer would not live to see the full implications of their work? The chamber was quieter now. The casual mockery had faded, replaced by something approaching thoughtful consideration. But there's more, Dr. Martinez continued. Mortality creates what we call generational transfer urgency. Each human generation must rapidly pass on everything they've learned to the next. We cannot rely on individual experience accumulating over millennia. Instead, we've developed the most efficient knowledge transfer systems in the known galaxy. The display showed human educational institutions, libraries, and databases. A human child can access the accumulated knowledge of our entire species by age 15. Our universities compress centuries of learning into 4-year programs. Our apprenticeship systems transfer specialized skills from master to student in months rather than decades. Zexthai found herself leaning forward despite her earlier dismissiveness. The humans were describing something she had never considered, the possibility that limitations could drive capabilities rather than restrict them. Furthermore, Dr. Martinez said, our mortality has given us unique psychological traits that longer-lived species seem to lack. We call them urgency virtues. The display changed again, showing behavioral analysis data. Humans are risk-takers by necessity. We cannot afford to spend centuries debating whether to explore a new scientific theory or attempt a dangerous mission. We try, we fail, we learn, we try again, all within individual lifespans. We've also developed something called legacy thinking. Every human action is motivated by the knowledge that we will be judged by what we leave behind. Our architecture must outlast us. Our art must speak to generations we will never meet. Our discoveries must benefit children we will never see grow old. She gestured to images of human achievements, monuments that had stood for thousands of years. artworks that continued to move people centuries after their creators died, scientific theories that had shaped human understanding for generations. "Consider this," she said. "The longest-lived species in the galaxy is the eternal continuum, with individual lifespans exceeding 50,000 years. They achieved spaceflight 60,000 years ago. In all that time, they have colonized exactly 7 star systems. Humans have existed as a technological species for less than 200 years and are already planning expeditions to dozens of nearby systems." The Eternal Continuum's representative, an ancient being whose form seemed to shift between dimensions, spoke for the first time in the session. "We are thorough. We consider all possibilities before acting." "And that thoroughness is valuable," Dr. Martinez replied respectfully, "but it also means that opportunities pass while you deliberate. Humans cannot afford such luxury. We must act with incomplete information, learn from our mistakes, and adapt quickly." She activated a new section of her presentation. "This brings us to our next point. Humans have developed the most sophisticated systems for dealing with uncertainty in the galaxy. We cannot wait for perfect information because we simply don't have time." The display showed human decision-making models, risk assessment protocols, and adaptive management systems. "We've learned to make good decisions quickly, rather than perfect decisions slowly. This skill becomes valuable when dealing with rapidly changing situations like first contact protocols, crisis management, or exploration of unknown territories." "But perhaps most importantly," Dr. Martinez continued, "our mortality has given us something that we believe is unique in galactic civilization: the ability to accept and plan for our own obsolescence." This statement caused visible confusion among the council members. Several translation devices hummed with activity as they struggled to convey the concept. "Every human institution is designed to function beyond the lifetime of its founder. Every human government must transfer power regularly. Every human business must plan for leadership succession. We have become masters of creating systems that improve and evolve without depending on any single individual's longevity." She smiled again. "How many of your governments have been led by the same individuals for thousands of years? How many of your institutions have stagnated because their immortal founders could never imagine being replaced?" The chamber fell silent. It was an uncomfortable truth that many of the council members had never confronted. Immortality, or near immortality, had made them resistant to change, not because they were incapable of it, but because they saw no urgent need for it. "We're not claiming that short lifespans are superior to long ones," Dr. Martinez said. "We're suggesting that they're different, and that this difference has value. Our rapid generational turnover means fresh perspectives every few decades. Our urgency drives innovation. Our mortality motivates us to build things larger than ourselves. The transmission showed human cities, human art, human institutions. Every human creation is an attempt to achieve immortality through legacy. We cannot live forever, so we create things that will." As the second transmission ended, the council chamber was noticeably quieter than it had been at the start of the session. The humans had presented something unexpected, not a plea or an excuse for their limitations, but a systematic analysis of how those limitations had shaped them into something unique. Zexathai reviewed her notes from the presentation. The humans had made logical arguments backed by data and psychological analysis. More disturbing, they had identified weaknesses in long-lived civilizations that she recognized but had never articulated. The Borvani general was uncharacteristically silent. The Crystalline Confederacy delegation huddled in conference. Even the temporal weavers seemed to be giving the human arguments serious consideration. But it was the final human transmission that would truly shock the council. The humans had saved their most compelling argument for last, and it would force every member of the Galactic Council to reconsider not just humanity's application, but their own assumptions about civilization, progress, and the value of existence itself. The third transmission would reveal that the humans had not just adapted to their short lifespans, they had weaponized them. The third transmission began differently from the others. Instead of a single speaker, the display showed a massive auditorium filled with thousands of humans. At the podium stood an elderly woman whose presence commanded immediate attention, even across the vast distances of space. "I am Secretary General Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Council," she announced. "I am 91 years old, which means I have perhaps 5 to 10 years remaining in my lifespan. This will be humanity's final presentation to the Galactic Council." The chamber fell completely silent. There was something in the human's tone, not desperation or pleading, but a quiet confidence that made even the most dismissive council members pay attention. "For the past several hours, you have listened to our colleagues explain how mortality shapes human psychology and drives our rapid development. What they have not yet explained is the most crucial aspect of human civilization. How our brief lifespans have made us masters of something that no long-lived species has ever had to master." Secretary General Vasquez paused, her eyes seeming to focus on each delegation in turn. "We have become the galaxy's experts in survival." The display behind her shifted to show human history, but not the triumphant technological achievements from earlier presentations. This showed wars, disasters, famines, plagues, and catastrophes. "Every human alive today is the descendant of survivors," she continued. "Not just survivors of natural disasters or cosmic events, but survivors of the most brutal teacher in the universe, time itself. For 70,000 years, every generation of humans has faced the same challenge: accomplish everything that matters before you die." General Craxus leaned forward, his warrior instincts recognizing something familiar in the human's tone. "This has created what we call generational pressure warfare," Secretary General Vasquez explained. "Every 30 years, human civilization faces a complete turnover in leadership, ideas, and approaches. We cannot coast on past successes because the people who achieved them are gone. We cannot become complacent because we don't have time for complacency." The display showed human conflicts throughout history. "You see warfare, and you dismiss it as primitive aggression. What you're actually seeing is evolution in action. Every human war, every human conflict, every human crisis has been a selection event that has refined our species' ability to adapt, innovate, and overcome seemingly impossible challenges." She gestured to specific examples. 700 years ago, a plague killed 1/3 of our population. Instead of being destroyed, we emerged with better medicine and stronger institutions. 400 years ago, we faced the threat of global climate change. We developed new technologies and fundamentally altered our energy systems. 100 years ago, we nearly destroyed ourselves with nuclear weapons. We created international institutions that have prevented global war for generations. The Depth Dweller representative spoke from his tank. "You're describing your species as essentially self-destructive and violent." "No," Secretary General Vasquez replied firmly. "We're describing our species as anti-fragile. We don't just survive crises, we become stronger because of them. And we've had to develop this capability because we don't have the luxury of waiting out problems for millennia." The display changed to show current human civilization: efficient, dynamic, constantly evolving. Every human institution you see today has been battle-tested against time itself. Our governments must function despite complete leadership changes every few years. Our economies must adapt to constantly shifting demographics as generations age and die. Our technologies must be designed, built, and implemented within single lifespans. Ambassador Lyrian projected her thoughts into the chamber. "You're suggesting that your mortality is a form of strength. We're suggesting that our mortality has made us uniquely valuable to galactic civilization Secretary General Vasquez responded. Consider your own species' greatest challenges. The Elongari have been struggling to terraform difficult worlds for thousands of years because your approach is too cautious. The Crystalline Confederacy has been unable to develop effective AI because your long lifespans make you resistant to the rapid iteration required for machine learning. Murmurs of discomfort rippled through the chamber. The human was identifying specific weaknesses that each species had been reluctant to acknowledge. The Borvani military has superior individual warriors, but has been unable to adapt to modern asymmetric warfare because your leadership structure hasn't changed in millennia. The temporal weavers have vast cosmic perspective but struggle with immediate tactical decisions because you're accustomed to viewing events across geological timescales. She paused, letting these observations settle. These aren't criticisms. They're descriptions of how longevity creates its own blind spots and limitations. The display shifted again to show projections and scenarios. Now let me show you what human temporal thinking could contribute to galactic civilization. The first scenario showed a galactic crisis response. Imagine a plague that spreads across multiple star systems. Long-lived species would spend decades in committee developing the perfect response while billions die. Humans would immediately implement multiple parallel solutions, except that some would fail, learn from failures in real time, and adapt approaches within months rather than years. The second scenario depicted technological development. Imagine the discovery of a new energy source that could revolutionize galactic civilization, but requires rapid development to prevent competitors from gaining advantages. Long-lived species would spend centuries perfecting the technology. Humans would deploy functional versions within years and improve them through successive generations. The third scenario showed diplomatic crisis management. Imagine a breakdown in communication between two alien species that threatens galactic peace. Long-lived species would attempt to mediate based on ancient protocols and historical precedents. Humans would rapidly develop new communication methods, try unconventional approaches, and find solutions that neither side had considered. Secretary General Vasquez stepped closer to the display. But perhaps most importantly, we offer something that no other species in the galaxy possesses: the ability to make hard decisions quickly. The chamber tensed. This was clearly leading somewhere significant. Your species have achieved remarkable stability and prosperity, she continued. But stability can become stagnation. When you have forever, you tend to put off difficult decisions. When you have 70 years, you make them today. The display showed a new projection, one that caused visible distress among several delegations. Our long-range surveys have detected something you are all aware of, but have been reluctant to address. The galactic core is showing signs of instability that could affect all inhabited systems within the next 10,000 years. Zexthai's crystalline features shifted to show alarm. This information was classified at the highest levels of the Galactic Council. For 3,000 years, your council has been studying this problem, forming committees, commissioning reports, debating solutions. Meanwhile, the countdown continues, and you are no closer to a solution than when you started. Secretary General Vasquez's voice took on new intensity. Humans have reviewed your data, all of it. We've spent 50 years, nearly a full human lifespan, developing what we believe is a viable solution. Not a perfect solution, not a risk-free solution, but a workable solution that could be implemented within the next 500 years. The chamber erupted in shocked conversations. Species that had been working on this problem for millennia had been outdone by creatures they considered barely more than insects. But here's what makes this truly significant, she continued, raising her voice above the commotion. We're not proposing to implement this solution ourselves. We're proposing to teach other species how to think like humans. The noise died away as the implications sank in. We want to establish temporal thinking institutes throughout the galaxy. Training centers where long-lived species can learn to make decisions under time pressure, to iterate rapidly, to accept partial solutions while working toward better ones. The display showed the proposed curriculum, accelerated decision-making protocols, risk assessment under uncertainty, rapid prototyping methodologies, generational knowledge transfer techniques. We want to teach you how to think like mortals while retaining the benefits of your immortality. Secretary General Vasquez moved to her final point. For thousands of years, galactic civilization has been stable but stagnant. You've achieved a kind of equilibrium where everyone is comfortable but no one is really growing. Humans represent something different: controlled instability, beneficial chaos, productive crisis. She gestured to the humans in the auditorium behind her. Every person you see here will be dead within a century. But the institutions they build, the knowledge they create, the problems they solve, these will outlive them. We create our immortality through our work, not through our biology. The display showed one final projection: a timeline of galactic development with and without human participation. The difference was stark: exponential growth and advancement versus gradual decline into cosmic irrelevance. We're not asking you to become mortal, she concluded. We're asking you to learn from mortality. We're offering to teach you the one thing that your long lifespans have made it impossible for you to learn: how to live as if time matters. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in unprecedented silence. The humans had done more than defend their short lifespans. They had revealed them as a unique evolutionary advantage that could benefit all galactic civilization. Zexthai looked around the chamber at her fellow delegates. For the first time in her long life, she felt something she had never experienced before: urgency. The humans had shown them data about the galactic core crisis that their own committees had been sitting on for millennia. More disturbing, they had apparently solved problems that her own species considered intractable. General Craxus was the first to speak. These humans, they've made me see my own stagnation. My armies have been using the same tactics for 8,000 years because they work. But working and optimal are not the same thing. The Crystalline Confederacy delegate was reviewing calculations on her personal display. Their energy utilization projections are mathematically sound. More than sound, they're elegant. How did they compress our 1,000-year research cycles into 50 years? Ambassador Lyrian's thoughts carried a note of wonder that surprised everyone, including herself. They think differently. Not better or worse, but fundamentally different. Their limitations have forced them to develop capabilities we never needed to develop. The voting began without formal discussion. For the first time in Galactic Council history, a species membership application was approved unanimously, not despite their obvious biological limitations, but because of them. As the final votes were tallied, Zexthai realized that the humans had taught them something profound about existence itself. Time wasn't just duration, it was pressure, motivation, and meaning. The humans hadn't overcome their mortality. They had transformed it into their greatest strength. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place, and for creatures who had lived for millennia without significant change, that was the most shocking discovery of all.